The goal of this project is to connect the present-day revolutions of Egypt and Libya to their country's histories. We will begin with Egypt. The history of modern Egypt can be broken up into three periods. We will be focusing on the Republic period, which began in 1953. It started when Gamal Abdel Nasser and Mohammed Najib overthrew the Egyptian monarchy, which had been supported by the British. Gamal Abdel Nasser led a series of economic and education reforms that was dubbed Arab socialism. This was very beneficial for the lower class, and it led to a bigger middle class. He also nationalized the Suez Canal and built the High Dam, which was very beneficial for the Egyptian economy. He was also notable for his strong stance against Israel. All of this combined led him to be a charismatic leader in not only Egypt but the Arab world. Egypt had also flourished, and this was dubbed their golden age. He would die in office in 1970. Anwar Sadat was the next president. He was infamous for being lenient with Israel and leading an economic policy called Infata. This economic policy ended social welfare and led to privatization, which lowered the middle class. His lenient stance with Israel culminated when he signed a peace treaty in 1973. He would be assassinated in 1981 by militaristic extremists. Hosni Mubarak would be the next president of Egypt, and he took over after Sadat's death. He supported the United States, despite the Egyptian people not supporting that notion. In 1991, he supported the US in the first Gulf War. This led to their massive debt being forgiven by the Europe in the West, but none of this money trickled down to the middle and lower class. In 1986 was the first sign of revolutionary fervor. In 1997 was the most notable event, and it was the bombing of the Luxor tourist attraction in Egypt, which was targeted at foreigners. This was a sign of the Egyptian people's distaste and foreign influence. Despite this unrest, he kept power for another 15 years. This is when we see the similarities between him and Charles Taylor and Robert Mugabe. He was corrupt in the business sector in terms of monopolies and citing a huge wealth gap. Legislatively, he kept the emergency law, which allowed him to detain people indefinitely and without trial. This was also coupled with heavy censorship. This is why the internet was so advantageous to the Egyptian people. It allowed them to be anonymous and gave a voice to the voiceless. And this is why the Egyptian Revolution was possible in the 21st century. And not only that, Egypt's advantage was that they had a strong media presence, which whenever a revolution turned violent, it was heard around the world. Libya gained independence from Allied occupation in 1951. King Idris was declared king. He looked to stay close with the West and the Arab world, which was unique at that time. However, this was also seen as hypocritical. What also furthered his hypocritical reputation was in 1967, he did not militarily support the Arab world and the fight against Israel in the Six-Day War. In 1959, oil was found in Libya, and the Libyan people were excited but wary of the newfound riches. He tried to employ Arab socialism policies to help his people, but they did not work. In 1969, a coup d'etat led by Muammar Gaddafi was led, and it was a bloodless coup d'etat. Muammar Gaddafi looked to employ more Arab socialism and increased relations with the Soviet Union. He led a series of reforms called Jamahiriya, but this caused the people to be upset and gave him more power instead of the people. Like Charles Taylor, Robert Mugabe, and Hosni Mubarak, he used heavy censorship. Also, he incited tribal warfare by giving economic advantages to tribes that supported him. Another way he retained power was he kept the national military weak while strengthening his own personal guard. The revolutions in Libya were inspired by the revolutions in Egypt and Tunisia and manifested similarly. It used the internet, and once again, the anonymity of the internet allowed people to fight back and unite against their government. However, unfortunately, Libya's revolution ended in a bloody war instead of peaceful protests. But the rebels would win, and a national transition council was set up. I hope this project showed you how the past of Libya and Egypt and their corrupt administrations led to these revolutions, and how instrumental the use of internet was in these Arab revolutions.